You're now entering the LuxCore Studios. And you've secured a seat for the Protecting Your Radius podcast. Here, we build connections from your contracting profession to some of the top bleeding edge products and services. Don't get deterred. Let's not delay. Here is your host, Nathan Downs.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Protecting Your Radius podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Downs, and on today's episode, we have Mr. Alan Boulding from Moore, Oklahoma with Trusted Fencing in the studio. Alan, welcome, buddy.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me up here.
Absolutely, man. So we've been hanging out all day.
We have.
Learning some stuff, and I thought there's a common question, and we're going to get right into the crux of all this. A lot of guys ask, I'm doing great in residential. I want to expand. So the natural thing easily, right, in all of our heads is we immediately go to commercial.
Correct.
And you have some experience in that already because you're a licensed electrician by trade before fence.
Correct. So I knew a lot of the terminology, what we need to do, how we need to do some things, but I don't understand the specs. Like, how do I need to find the specs so quick? How do I need to find the fence details so quick?
Yeah.
You know, so that's what my goal was today with you, was to go through a couple bids, and so we can sit down and figure out, like, how do I make my workflow faster?
Yep. And we went through one massive bid.
Easy one.
Yeah. We've been working on it for 4 or 5 hours. I mean,
Yes.
That's a big job. I mean, it ended up being, good Lord. I mean, what, about 1,800 feet of iron and another 800 feet of chain link and some special gates and looking at all the...
Threw some twist in there, you know, like the underneath the stadium, you know, that extra fencing that needed to be in there.
Mm-hmm.
If you didn't know how to read a set of prints, that would eat your lunch.
Forever.
Yes.
I mean, because think about how many returns are there, 11 or 12 of those custom bias cut. You have to knuckle this. This is 9-gauge core. I mean, I'm adding a ton of money on that.
Yeah.
Because you have to. Because like you said, you don't see that, you're going to get killed on a job like that.
And that's what I was saying is, like, you know, from my background as being an electrician, you know, I got lighting packages, I have gear packages. So, like, I have my standards from the NEC to build off of, and boom, like, there's my bid. Like, I feel like it's a little faster because they cater to those trades a little more.
Sure.
And fencing, like, I was looking through a few different sets of prints, and I was like, Nathan, like, this is killing me. Like, it's not really giving me a lot of details.
Right.
And so that's why you're like, come on up, let's go over a few.
So what were some of the big things that you noticed as we kind of went through all of that? What would you say are maybe your top 2 or 3 takeaways?
Well, you know, I've had a copy of the ASTM for quite a while.
Yep. Mm-hmm. I
expressed that, you know, I really haven't read through it, you know? So, like, when we were talking about the post and how to find them, you know what I mean? Like, that makes a lot of sense. It was like, I've been asked to quote a few commercial jobs, and I've always been like, hey, what's your specs? And they're like, well, you know what I mean? And I'm like, so is this a commercial job, or is this like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it was nice coming in and getting on a set of prints that did have the specs. Then you showing me, like, this is where and how we find it. It's crazy how you know your part numbers and stuff so quick and so fast. That shows the experience you have.
Sure.
Because like, it took you 5-6 hours. That'd probably take me about 3 to 4 days to do what you did today. Truthfully.
Right. Yeah.
At this point in my career.
Yeah. And I think that as you kind of go through some of the things, I think that's a great takeaway for people that don't do commercial every day out there listening, going, hold on, what did he just say?
Yeah.
Like, Nathan and Alan did it in 5 hours,
right?
Where it would have taken someone else 2 days. So you have to plan on that just if you want to try it.
Right. That's that lost production where you're not making any money.
Right.
That you're throwing a lot into the wind and hoping that you get something back.
Right. Exactly. So there's part of the grass is greener on the other side for you residential guys. You know, we all say, you know, I want to get in commercial. And I think that was why it was funny was, you know, I had 4 jobs that we were going to look at.
Right.
And just the fact that I chose the big job first and for us to go through a municipal job, really break down, like, showing you, like, what a bid book looks like how to read that, how to understand what scopes are, what the standard is today compared to maybe what it was a couple of years ago, and how it changes.
It was very interesting. Like, even though I know I was yawning a few times, I was kind of getting a little heavy-eyed.
Yeah.
But but
a
I
lot.
did take away a lot.
Sure. Good.
So
What other things on top of that? I mean, I know we talked about, I think one thing you hit on, and I'd like to see if you could expound upon it, is like the material. So, right? Like just talking about, what did you learn when we're talking about the different materials for chain link, and then even what I showed you on the iron?
So, I mean, it is such a competitive thing. Like, you really got to pay attention, extruded versus,
fuse bonded.
Fuse bonded.
Yep.
Those little details, that can end up costing you quite a bit.
Yeah.
And it's just one letter difference. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, like, in order to do something like what we did today, I think you need to be extremely detail oriented. Because, like, you screw up on a residential job, you forget a section of fence or whatever. It's like, whatever. I'll fix it on the next one, or I'll pay better attentions for my P&L sheet if you're even doing P&L sheets.
Yeah.
But something like what we did today, like, if you miss just even some of the smaller details, well, the materials will eat your lunch.
Absolutely. Well, think about this. So we were going through and looking at that chain link spec.
Yeah.
And it said class 2A, extruded and bonded wire. But what did I immediately tell you? I said, sure.
2B.
It says, yeah. And it said, the first thing it said was 9-gauge core. So, the expectation, what they are looking for is they want a 9-gauge steel with black coating. That's all they're really asking for.
Right.
But they're asking for a 6-gauge extruded and bonded, which I'm like, no, we're not doing that. We're going to do a class 2B. We'll give them a better product, but it's easier for us to handle. It's not as, there's all sorts of advantages. But if you don't know that, like we were talking about, I mean, you just be lost. You'd be out there bidding 6-gauge extruded bonded.
Well, and that's something that I really wanted to talk to you about whenever I came up here, was like, how do I make sure, when we were going through the prints and stuff like that, you pointed out that they had the grounding and bonding under ours.
Yep.
And you're like, we're not electricians. We're not doing that. And I was like, oh, well, I know from my background that I used to do some of that. You know what I mean? So knowing now to really pay attention, so that way I don't get caught up on something like that either. Like, really be really detail oriented. Like, first and foremost, detail oriented if you're going to get into the commercial world.
Yeah. And that was one of the first things I showed you, was making sure that you're like, people are aware, like, you can put on your bid, you can say that there's exclusions.
Yeah.
Like, you can straight up tell them, like, no, we're not going to do that. And like I said, that was the first note I made, was we're not grounding the fence. Like, that's not what we do. The electrician needs to do that. So in my exclusions, I'm going to have that. I'm going to have where that retaining wall situation was.
Yep.
If we need to do core drilling or whatever, I'm going to have an exclusion for all material assumed installed in dirt with concrete footers by contractor. Core drilling will be so many dollars per hole.
In addition to.
Yeah, exactly. As an add-on per each. So they have a unit price. So if these things pop up down the road and they use our estimate for part of the appendix for the bid and everything like that, then I can come back with a change order and be like, and there's not a surprise. It's like, well, no, we look at the elevation detail and you can't see where the fence is going. But you see the fence is going by it, but on one of the pictures, it looks like it's on top. But then when you get to the detail, it's not. So that's really an RFI situation. So RFI is request for information from the architect. And we still have time on this one. So like I mentioned to you, I'm going to send an RFI on that to start. Is one of the 2 or 3 things I saw that I was concerned about, because I don't want to get caught up over 100 feet of core drill and stuff. Or should we have sleeved it? Is the wall, when we looked at the detail, is that wall even thick enough to put the fence on?
Right. I didn't.
And it's,
I didn't
what I'm saying?
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it's chain link.
Yeah.
Behind there. So then I'm going, well, hold on, the wall curves. So if we're on the wall and now we're doing chain link, do I need to make, 5 turns, like 5 corners on that? Or, I mean, I don't know. Didn't really clearly show it.
Right.
But those are the things, like you said, just like underneath the stands and all that stuff. It's the little details that can.
The devil's in the details.
For sure. For sure.
So
now that you've gone through a full spec book, a CM bid book, the plans, we went through everything. What do you feel? And again, you've read blueprints before, from the electrical side. So what do you feel about what you've seen on the fence side of the house?
I'm honestly excited to start looking at the smaller projects like your Dunkin' Donuts or
Yeah.
Starbucks or something like that, where there's going to be a little bit of Ameristar out front.
Yep.
It's something that's easy to work yourself into. You just, I'm looking at my point. I'm licensed, bonded, and insured. So why ain't I in the commercial side of things?
Yeah.
So I'm excited to get back home and get into the spec book a little bit and highlight things and kind of broaden my knowledge.
Yeah.
So that's, honestly, that's what I'm excited about taking away from today.
For over 30 years, Southwest Automated Security has been the premier provider of gate operators, access controls, CCTV, and so much more. Visit southwestautomated.com today, taking dealers to the next level.
And what's easy for any of you guys out there, and Alan, I would challenge you. You're right. Like, that's the way to look at them. You look at a Dunkin' Donuts.
Yeah.
Look at those high vis type opportunities.
Right.
And then get the trash enclosure. Get the little bit of railing.
Right.
Maybe there's one side where they have to have an opaque fence because of a neighborhood, or it's a zoning thing, like in the city or the county you're working in. And just picking up that little bit of business and slapping your sign up there, right?
Yep.
It just adds more exposure. They're easy to do. And then you just got to figure it out. And like we do often, we bid a lot and have started getting a lot of the fast food. And, there was like a salad and go and some of these other things had very specific, like, we want this, WPC composite, Okay, we start going into this and we can do all this. We could set you up with this.
Yeah.
And, but the exposure side of it, it's not a very big job, but it still ends up being a substantial ticket item.
Right.
But it also shows that you're like, I think if you can get a handful of those first, then when you get to like a school project, like a bond job, like we just looked at, you're like, okay, now you can see when the day's worth of work, the payoff to that, right? When you haven't done it before.
Well, and something I've done since I've started my business is that I've always tried to watch out for profitable jobs and not sell myself short or, be the bottom guy. So that way I can build in the time and start looking at these kinds of projects, and I have the time allotted. Yeah. So I'm not like hoping and praying I get this. Like, it's okay if I do or I don't. Like, I can go back and doing some more residential work, build up my bankroll, and then I can take my shot at the next one or the next one. Yep. And so that's something that a lot of guys in the residential field that need to understand. Is stop doing the race to the bottom.
Yep. It's hard. It's a hard transition to make.
I guess I never did it.
But I would say it's hard to mentally look at like commercial work and think about it from a different perspective. And it is different. Yeah. And like, even as we were going through the plans and, you start digging into all these things, there's so many more details like we've been talking about that you could, it's not just slapping up a wood fence or a chain link fence.
And that's something that guys also got to understand when you go to like commercial projects or school projects or federal projects, they're going to start expecting you to understand what a JSA is. Yeah. They're going to expect you to know about OSHA 10 at the very minimum. Yeah. They're going to expect you to do stretch and flexes. Right. And like, if you've never been in that background, like, go take a job and go work for somebody for a while and do some commercial work for them. Yeah. You know what I mean? And actually get your feet wet. Don't just jump into it willy-nilly. Like,
I think I mentioned this a month or so ago on the podcast, but I think now would be a good time for many of the people watching this that are young. Mm-hmm. Like, even if they're not young, but specifically those of you that are young, that are doing your own thing, maybe subcontracting, trying to, things are starting to slow down on the residential side. You're one of the pandemic baby businesses, born out of necessity because, everyone's too busy. So now, I guess I own a fence company. But like, looking at that saying, okay, I can humble myself enough to go get some experience. Like, my experience wasn't in the field, but it was from a different angle from the manufacturer perspective. And then I ask a lot of questions. So like everything you've seen, like that's actually me doing it from a desk for forever and then getting out in the field after 10 years of doing it from a desk and it immediately picking up and clicking. So like you were in the field. You're
I
like
did
the electrician that was doing the thing.
I did it 15 years in the field.
Bro.
You know,
like it. Like, a toolbox talk. All these things. Like you said, a JSA, a JHA, whatever you guys want to call it out there.
I've been a safety meeting or two.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like,
I
have been there, you know? And so now I'm trying to go from being out in the field into the office. And that's why I've reached out to so many people, and asked for so much help, like it's out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
absolutely. Well, I'm glad you made it up today to learn that. We'll kind of wrap this thing up and put a bow on it. What other things, I don't know, what other thoughts do you have on all this stuff? I mean, I know it's exciting. It's a little nerve wracking. Like I said, this is a big freaking job we just looked at. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff just coming at you a million miles an hour, man.
I mean, it was intimidating at points, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Especially when you start going through all the specs, you know what I mean?
Yep.
You're like, you knew off the top of head, the SS40 is,
right.
And I was like, what? Like, no, slow down. Let's look at the ASTM. You know what I mean? Like, show me, how do I figure this out? But moving forward, like, I'm just excited about, like, continuing my craft and, like, learning more and, like, getting my feet wet in new projects. Like I'm ready to do some of the one-offs. I'm ready to do some of the food chains. I'm ready to do, like, just keep tackling projects one after another.
Yep, absolutely.
I want to stay versatile, like you said, I was a Corona baby, you know what I mean? Like I came out of necessity. Like my business took off because layoffs happened and I just took off with it. Like I had the money. I couldn't buy electrical stuff. The supply houses wouldn't sell to people unless you had been in business, because they couldn't get parts.
Yeah, there was no new electrical businesses,
not happening.
Companies coming online,
not happening. Yeah. So fencing was something that I felt like I could pick up fairly quick.
And you were already doing it part time.
I was I was a Chuck in the truck, or a Dan in the van.
No, that's cool, man. No, I think that's important to understand but the one thing you've done different that I would encourage everybody, because we talked about this today too, is specifically reinvesting in your business and in yourself, and then understanding that you're only going to get so far because of the information that you don't have. And this is a new industry, sort of like construction's construction. So like, I think a lot of people get that confused often, because I'm like, it doesn't freaking matter if you're a plumber, a fence guy, a gate guy, an electrician, an HVAC guy. I mean, it's kind of all the same.
You just need standards.
Right. So like we were talking about earlier, understanding like the chain link pipe, and you're like, I didn't know the difference between this and this and this. And I'm like, that's okay. Like a lot of people may not know Schedule 40 to SS40 or whatever any brand wants to call it. But like we start getting into those specifics and really explaining it. And once you understand it, you have a different appreciation.
I do.
And what's great about that for you, Alan, and anybody out there listening, is as you grow and as you learn more, you'll naturally feel better about yourself in this profession.
And that's exactly what I want. I want to sleep easy at night. Like I want to build people's fences properly. I want to meet and exceed the standards. So that way I can see people around my community and shake their hands and not feel like I have to run down another aisle at the grocery store because we halfway did their job, or we were the cheapest bidder and we came in and we just kind of pieced it together.
Right.
I want a nice and easy life. You know what I mean? I do dumb hard work, but nice and easy life.
Yeah. And I can tell you guys one thing that Alan and I were talking about this morning is you have done a great job of selling value and selling quality. Because even we were talking about some specific numbers between our companies. I was shocked at like the margins that Alan's getting on some of the stuff. I'm like, holy crap, I'm coming to Oklahoma City. And then like all the buddies out there right now just heard me say that are like, get that, stay up in Tulsa. But like that's cool, man, because it just reminds me of like each one of us sets what our precedence is for our company and our image and what we are to our clients.
Right.
And through trusted fencing, like you've established a premium brand in a short period of time that people are paying. Oh my gosh. Like I love the margins they're paying, but they're getting what they expect.
Right.
And that's why you continue to grow and get more business.
And that's it. before I started my fence business, I was already listening to a ton of podcasts.
Yeah.
Listening to business coaches say, 50% or better, or sell your brand, build your brand, do this, do that.
Yeah.
And so that's what I like to take away is like, I invested in myself a whole lot before I ever actually spent $1 on the business.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
So
got to be getting better. Fortunately, most people listening to this or watching this
are
in that mindset, which is why you're watching this or listening to it right now. So anyways, it's so good. Like I said, if you got one more nugget, it's Alan. Alan is, man, you're just a treasure trove. I appreciate just getting to hang out with you, man.
No,
you got a lot. You ask great questions.
I've enjoyed myself. I've called you more than once. I've texted you. I've asked questions, and like, for the guys that are kind of struggling or whatever, $20 a month, Audible, whatever it is, like Robert,
Whitaker,
he's mentioned it. Like that's another place that I've thought, like when I'm out building the fence, I'm not listening to music 90% of the time. Like I'm nerding out on a podcast or a book. Sometimes I'll listen to so many books and then I'll do something that's for leisure or pleasure, just kind of give my mind a break and to implement those things.
Yeah.
Like you've got to, whenever you're working on stuff, you can't expect immediate results.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Like typically you got to give it a little bit of time. You've got to measure what's.
Yep.
So
it's the same way like going to work out at the gym. Like you're not going to get a gym membership tomorrow, start eating better and start lifting weights and be jacked and yoked in a week.
I've had a gym membership the last 2 years and I've actually gained weight since I've been building fence.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what happens in the fence world too.
I'm telling you.
I mentioned this a while back, but this summer, I don't know if it was Aaron up at A to Z Fencing or someone else posted this meme, and I saved it on my phone because it's so awesome. Yeah. But it's did you see this one that is the lobster from SpongeBob?
Yeah.
And he's like doing this. He's like, yeah. And it says, I'm a fencer. I live on Red Bull or energy drinks and gas station food.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God, I think that's right. I'm like, and then I ask everybody and they're like, I do live on energy drinks and gas station food. I'm like, we wonder why we're so unhealthy.
Well, my truck gets like 8 miles to the gallon, and I call it heifer, and so we always have to stop and graze about once every other day or so,
Right.
We're always hitting gas stations.
Oh, that's hilarious. I love it. Well, man, again, appreciate you. Hopefully you guys got something out of that. I would encourage, one of the things we're going to try to do, even for you, Alan, through the rest of the year is in between some of the other product episodes that we're going to have, is I'm going to be pushing a lot of information out there for guys answering questions because we've started getting more and more questions. There seems to be people are interested in insights or different views on things. So if anybody out there is listening to this and has questions specifically about, anything that has to do with your fence business or where you're at in the fencing industry or whatever, send those on to us. You can message us on any of the social media channels. We're radius_podcast, or you can email it directly to me at info@protectingyourradius.com. We've also got a thing at protectingyourradius.com on the website if you want to submit those. But yeah, I'd love to hear what kind of ideas and thoughts came up from this conversation. We've got another episode coming up talking specifically about, I had a conversation with one of the guys in Colorado area, and we were talking about how do you generate more opportunities in commercial specifically. And there's like how I personally did it. It's pretty interesting. I learned it from a business coach like 8 years ago. Right. And so my next episode after this is actually going to be specifically about that. And we're going to deep dive into how you do that, what it's called, why it works, what you have to do. And so stay tuned for that. But if there's other questions, Alan, as always, you can hit me up, send it on. We'll share it with everybody. And just appreciate you being here, buddy.
Man, I appreciate you having me up here.
Absolutely. So, all right, guys, peace. We'll see you next time. Thanks.
You've been listening to the Protecting Your Radius podcast from the LuxCore Studios in Bixby, Oklahoma. Thanks for sticking around, and connect with us and all of our partners at www.protectingyourradius.com. We want to thank our premier partners. LuxCore, the newest line of premium quality composite infill to slide into your FenceTech fence system. Frame your style today. Also, Stain Track, the world's first patented standalone stain machine. Utilizing flood coat technology, StainTrack covers boards, pickets, posts, and any type of dimensional wood you can think of. And what better way to use your StainTrack machine than to use the easy application WoodDefender family of stains. WoodDefender goes on easy and covers in one coat with no backbrushing. And of course, the true power of our show is you, the listener. Please rate and review our show on whatever platform you consume this content. Your 5-star likes and reviews help other contractors get the message that we all want to be better and do better. And in the construction world, we can never forget that before you can be great, you've got to be good. Before you can be good, you've got to be bad. But before you can even be bad, you've got to try.